Hey everybody, Chef Connie here, and this is going to be the homework video and guide for the California style Carnitas class that you'll be doing tomorrow. And so this homework should ideally be done the day before, because what we want to do is braise that pork, right? Sear it, braise it, and let it cool down in the liquid that it was braised in. And the real reason we want to do that is so that the fat will rise up to the top once that stock solidifies, and you'll be able to skim that off, okay? And so the only thing you are gonna need today, besides your beautiful faces for this homework, is of course a cutting board, okay? So go ahead and grab your cutting board, and then go ahead and grab your favorite chef's knife, okay? We are gonna be butchering some pork today, and if you have a fillet knife, that's awesome to use as well, okay? And then the only things we'll really need out of our sort of tool drawer is a wooden spoon, okay? Solid wooden spoon, of course. And you'll definitely need a pair of tongs, okay? And whenever you grab your tongs, give it 2 clicks, right? Make sure these babies are charged, all right? So go ahead and grab that. And then the only thing we'll need on our stoves today is a nice, happy Dutch oven, okay? I like to use Dutch ovens because not only can I sear the pork in this container, but I can pop that lid right on top and I can braise as is. If you don't have one of these Dutch ovens, you can absolutely use a braising pan or a Pyrex pan, right? Something with nice big size there, and a piece of aluminum foil to make sure that has full coverage, okay? And so as we're sort of searing off this pork, we're gonna have to remove the pork out of this seared tool here. And so go ahead and grab yourself either a large plate or a sheet tray, okay? So I'm just gonna go ahead, I'll sear my pork in here. Once those pieces of pork are browned on all sides, I'll land them on that sheet tray or plate, and then that way we can get our aromatics going as well, okay? And so that's all you're gonna need for the homework today. So super, super easy. And then the only things you will need out of your kit, of course, is that beautiful 2 pounds of pork shoulder, okay? So we got a little piece for you here. And depending on what part of the pork shoulder you received, it's all good because we're gonna cut this into 2-inch cubes. And the reason you wanna cut this pork into 2-inch cubes is so that all the pieces of pork are consistent, which means that they'll braise consistently, right? And so to add some flavor to our braise today, you're gonna go ahead and grab just one of those white onions. Go ahead and grab about 3 cloves of that garlic. And we're gonna braise this in with a little bit of dried chili. So go ahead and grab the arbos, which are the little baby guys. And these are small, but they pack quite some heat, okay? So just go ahead and grab 3, and you should have some left over for our salsa roja that we'll make tomorrow, okay? So just go ahead and grab 3 of just the little guys. You will for sure need your spice mix package, right? Your spice mix package right here. So it's about 2 tablespoons, it's already pre-measured. Go ahead and grab that. Make sure you have a little bit of whatever seasoning salt you use at home. Today I'm gonna be rocking kosher. Okay, so I got kosher right here, ready to go. And if you wanted to use a little bit of Balinese truffle salt, you totally could, but we're gonna use kosher today. But either way, totally works. And you'll for sure need that beautiful 24 ounces of bone broth. Okay, so get that going. Make sure it's defrosted. These like to come in frozen. Super helpful to make sure that is nice and defrosted, okay? And then we also asked for you guys to have just a little bit of tequila, okay? We're gonna be searing off all of our aromatics and then deglazing with a little bit of tequila here. If you don't have tequila, you can absolutely use some cooking wine, right? And if you don't have anything, you can do a few splashes of vinegar, but not a necessary step to this braise, but super helpful. And once we sort of cook off most of the alcohol, we're gonna get this really sweet agave flavor. So have your favorite tequila ready to go. And that's all we'll need for the homework today, okay? And so go ahead, take a minute, get those aprons strapped on, and let's get into it. Come on over here, and you'll notice I've removed that pork out of the package, okay? Remove that pork out of the package here. And what I'm gonna do is just lightly tap it with just a nice paper towel just to get some of that excess blood, okay? We don't need to worry about getting it too dry right now, but we do wanna get it removed from the package and onto our board, okay? And so I'm gonna go ahead and come on over here, and depending on what part of this pork you got, this pork shoulder that you got, some of you may be closer to the bone, some of your pieces may be closer to the bone, and this will open up. But as long as we cut this relatively the same size, we're good to go. Okay, and so what I'm gonna do is taking my knife, I'm gonna make 2-inch strips. And whenever you're cutting any sort of meat, right, you always wanna make sure it's nice and dry so that nothing moves around. And what I'm gonna do is nice, long strokes here, right? It's gonna go all the way across. And you can see I'm really not putting any pressure on my knife, so I get these really nice clean cuts, okay? And so with this piece, right, it's just 2 pounds here, I'll go ahead and just start off with 2-inch planks or strips, okay? Depending on what part of the pork shoulder you got. Oh, gorgeous, look at that. All right, and so now that I have these nice planks here, what I'm gonna do is just try and get these as consistent as possible, right? And we're going for 2-inch by 2-inch pieces, okay? And so I'm kind of just using that initial plank as my guide. And nice long strokes here, right? Letting that knife do the work for me. And since I am not putting a lot of pressure on my blade, even if my knife slips on some of this fatty pork, you can see my fingertips are nice and tight, and there's not a lot of pressure coming off of my blade. Awesome, so depending on what part of the pork you got, right, you're just getting these to be all nice and consistent in size. And so that way, one, we get a nice surface area to sear them on all sides, and they'll cook nice and consistently, okay? And so what I'm gonna do here is grab myself a nice medium-sized mixing bowl. Pop all these pieces of pork into this bowl. And so you'll notice that I used one hand to cut the pork, right, and one hand to touch the pork. And so whenever you're doing these meaty projects, right, it's always good to designate one hand as your meat-free hand, one hand as your meaty hand, right? Thunder, lightning, salt, pepper, ketchup, mustard, you get it, okay? And so what I'm gonna do here is, now that I have all of my beautiful pork in this bowl, I'm gonna come on over here with my kosher salt, and I'm gonna go ahead and give myself 2 very, very happy pinches of that kosher salt. And you guys know that when we season here at Truffle Shuffle, you gotta go ahead and get as high as you possibly can, right? And just give yourself a quick rain, okay? So once you have this initial salt on this pork here, what you're gonna do now is come on over with that seasoning spice, and you're just gonna go ahead and just make it rain real quick, all right? We're going all in with that packet, all right? All in. All right, so now that we have our seasoning done, now we can go ahead in with both hands, okay? And if you're uncomfortable touching raw meat like this, no problem. Always feel free to use gloves, especially when cooking that raw meat, or excuse me, when you're coating that raw meat in seasoning. And so what I'm gonna do now is just come on over here, and I'm just going to toss this pork in that salt and that spice blend, okay? And so you can see beautiful coating of seasoning here. And now we have a nice bit of salt, and you can see all that spice is in the bowl, okay? And so what we'll do is we'll let this pork come up to room temperature whilst being in that salt and that spice mix, okay? And that'll take about 10 to 15 minutes here, okay? And so what we'll do is we'll put this to the side, take a quick minute, go ahead, wash your hands, wash your cutting board, and we'll go right into cutting these aromatics. All right, my chefs, we are washed up. We got a nice clean board ready to go. And so if you haven't already, shimmy on over to your oven and turn your oven on to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, okay? If you have a convection setting on your oven, feel free to use that, right? Convection cooking just means that you get a nice overall even heat in your oven. So if you have that setting, great. If you don't, no problem at all, okay? And so while our pork is coming up to room temperature and marinating in this gorgeous seasoning, we are gonna start cutting all of the aromatics that we're gonna put in our braise, okay? And so the first thing I'm gonna go ahead and do is grab one of those white onions here. And we're gonna use this onion not only to season and flavor our braising liquid, but we're gonna dice this up so that as it braises, these onion pieces will liquefy, which is gonna give our carnitas a lot of flavor, okay? And so what I'm gonna do here is take that onion, whenever we're doing onions, right, you always wanna find that root, identify it, feel it, love it, right, our North Star. And then you wanna find that opposite end, okay? And so what I'm gonna do is just cut that right, expose that onion, nice flat side. In a perfect world, you could totally just throw this in the braise, but for today, we don't need to do that. But you totally can, right? That's lots of flavor. But we wanna use these onions as part of the braise. And so what I'll do is I'll cut that root right down the center. And if you have truffle shuffled with us, you are masters of the onion cuttery, right? If you ever find yourself in a pinch, you can always just cut these onions into quarters and throw them right in that braising liquid, no big deal. But for today, I want that dice so I can use this as a thickener for my sauce. Awesome, all right, so I have that root facing away from me. I'm gonna go ahead and do a small dice here. And so when you do a small dice, you wanna go ahead and make little incisions, keeping your fingertips nice and tight. And the space between each incision initially is determining the size of our dice. So I have that really nice small dice here. And then to make my squares, I'm gonna go ahead horizontally, and I'm just gonna make incisions going horizontally with that same amount of spacing, okay? Keeping my fingertips nice and tight. And so you'll see that nice even tic-tac-toe board. So you see how I went vertically the same space between and horizontally the same space between. And now all I have to do, going vertically again, is let these dices be free, okay? When you get to this point here, where it's a little bit wobbly, you can absolutely just turn it 90 degrees, right? And I'll separate that from my dices here. And what I'll do is I'll cut little strips. I'll turn it 90 degrees again. So all I've wasted is just that itty bitty root. And I'll turn this and I'll dice this as well, okay? So just a really great way to utilize all of that onion. Awesome. I'll do that on the second side as well. And you'll see that as you get a little bit more confident with your onion dicing skills, you can absolutely turn up the volume. And you'll also see that I don't really move the onion around that much at all, right? I just sort of pivot my knife around. Awesome. Once I get to that smaller part here, right? 90 degrees, 90 degrees, and dice that last little piece, okay? I am from a school of thought where no waste in my kitchen, okay? And this is the only thing I've wasted here. That's not that bad. Awesome. All right, so once you have your onions nice and secure here, you can go ahead and either grab a small bowl or plate, and we'll go ahead and extract these off of our board. And what I'll do is I'll just kind of scoop these right in. Sometimes you can go underneath your board, right? Slide those onions right off that board. And so we're gonna add garlic to this braise, but we don't want this garlic to disappear because we wanna be able to pick these pieces of garlic out of the braise once they're done. And so I'm gonna go ahead and grab my beautiful cloves of garlic here, and I'm gonna keep them in the skin. But if you just threw garlic in the braising liquid, just as so, you won't get any of those natural oils. So a really great tip, keeping that skin on, is either using the palm of your hand or the side of your knife, right? And just give it a really gentle smish mash. All right, Hulk smash it. And so that way you can see all those oils remove, and you'll also smell those oils as well. So whenever you're throwing garlic into a braising liquid, always just give it a really gentle smash and keep it in the skin so it's a lot easier to fish out later. I'm gonna go ahead and pop that right on that same plate as my onions because this will go in at the same time. You have your smashed garlic and your diced onions, and of course your 3 beautiful arbo chilies ready to go. Awesome. All right, so after you've allowed your pork to come up to room temperature in that seasoning for about 10 to 15 minutes, now we can start the braising process, okay? And so what I'm gonna do is come on over here to my Dutch oven here, and I'm gonna go ahead and add that 1/4 cup of canola oil. Okay, so 1/4 cup of canola oil going in. And I'm gonna turn this on nice and high. Okay, nice and high here. And we're gonna let this get nice and smoking hot, okay? And if you're unable to get one of these Dutch ovens, right, you're just doing this in a large saute pan or cast iron pan and then transferring all of this pork and these aromatics into whatever you decided to braise in, right? Your braising pan or your Pyrex pan, what have you. And we want to grab all of the flavor from searing the pork, but don't worry, we're going to be able to get all that flavor by deglazing with that tequila, okay? All right, once you start to see a little bit of smoke here, we'll go ahead and start searing these beautiful pieces of pork. And you may have to do this in batches, okay, depending on the size of your pan here. Once you have seared all sides of those pork pieces, right, you got that nice caramelization going on over here, looking absolutely gorgeous. And what you have here now in the pan, and I've gone ahead and turned the heat off for just a minute here, but I have all of this spice nice and black and right, nice and caramelized, but I don't want to waste any of this flavor, okay? And so what I'll do is I'm going to go ahead and reduce that heat nice and low now. And since this pan's already nice and hot, I'm just going to go ahead and very gently slide in those onions and those beautiful pieces of smashed garlic, okay? So I'm just going right in here, and I've turned the heat nice and low, okay? Nice and low here, and as you sort of mix up and stir in these onions, you're gonna see all that flavor is gonna be captured by these aromatics. So we're getting all of that blackened seasoning here, all that pork fat is getting absorbed by those onions. And so this right here is already smelling pretty incredible, okay? So let these just get nice and translucent, right? Let these pick up as much of that flavor as possible, and you'll see the bottom of your pan is nice and clean now. And so a really great way to capture all that flavor that might have been left behind, okay? So saute these up for just a minute with that wooden spoon, just stir it on up here. Once you've seen that the onions have turned a little translucent and you're also starting to smell all that flavor, here's where the magic happens, okay? Come on over with that tequila, okay? And what you're gonna wanna do is pour 2 tablespoons for the chef, okay? And then you'll go ahead and put 2 tablespoons into these onions, all right? And what's gonna happen is it's gonna be super exciting, but first, salud. Think. And so let that tequila deglaze this pan, right? And if you don't have tequila, wine will work. And you're just gonna let this cook down, but you'll also see all that tequila is really cleaning up the bottom of that pan, which is just grabbing all the flavor. Awesome. All right. Once you see that a majority of that tequila has been evaporated, what you've done is you've cooked out all of the raw alcohol, and what's left are those delicious natural sugars from that tequila and agave, okay? And so before we add our pork back into the base of our braising, we want to make sure that our broth is nice and liquefied, okay? So I'm going to come on over here, open up that chicken broth, and I'm going to go ahead and add this to this beautiful pot right here. If some of your chicken broth is a little frozen, right, just allow it to defrost in this beautiful mixture here. Make sure this is nice and liquefied. And now you have this beautiful braising base for your pork, okay? So I'm gonna make sure to get all the sides here. And so what I'll do while this chicken broth is coming up to a simmer, right? We're gonna bring this up to a very, very happy simmer. I'm gonna go ahead and grab those chili audibles and I'll pop them right in, okay? And what that will do is as our chicken stock comes up to a simmer, we're gonna steep those chilies and we're gonna extract some of that spicy flavor, okay? And so while you're waiting for this to come up to a simmer, you can go ahead and land your pork back in, okay? And so I'm just gonna strategically place these in here. And you'll see a little bit of that fat removed itself. That's perfect. And so whenever you are braising anything, right? Perfect fit right there. You want to go ahead and save all of that good. Okay, save all that good here. All this is potential flavor, and you can see that beautiful pork fat with that spice mix. Delicious. So the pork is in the stock now here. Everything is fusing together, and we are going to bring this up to a simmer, okay? It's super important that you bring whatever you're braising up to that initial simmer so that you get that first bit of heat so that once you pop it in the oven isn't in charge of bringing everything up together, okay? So whenever you're braising, make sure that you get it to a simmer on your stove top, cover it with either your Dutch oven lid or your aluminum foil, and you're ready to go, okay? So in the recipe, we like to say to add a little bit of cilantro, okay? And this is totally optional, but I like to add a little bit of cilantro because one, as you'll see, it sort of weighs down my pork, which keeps it submerged into the liquid, right? Kind of like a little hat. And I just used about a half bunch, okay? So totally optional here. It's definitely in the recipe. And so if you want to save that for the actual tacos, go for it. But this is going to add a little bit of weight to our braise to keep that pork nice and submerged. And it's going to add a little bit of liquid, okay? If you find yourself in a position where you don't have enough stock, okay? Say that your pan's a little bit larger than mine and that pork isn't completely submerged. Here's a couple things you can do. One, if you have any other reserve of stock, any other chicken stock from a previous class, go ahead and just make sure that pork is completely submerged. Or what you can do is grab yourself a nice Mexican lager, right? Crack that open. And then what you can do is just add enough beer to just cover that pork, okay? And what that's gonna do is gonna allow a lot of sugars, right? That lager, kind of like when you braise pork with cola or Pepsi. Really nice sugar is going to be added to it. So if you do not have enough stock, right, just say your container is a little bit larger than mine and you don't have enough liquid, feel free to use any stock, beer, or just extra water, okay? All right, so once your pot comes up to a simmer, right, you want to see those bubbles. And a quick recap, what we've done is we have seared our pork in the canola oil on all sides. We removed that pork. Then we added our onions and our smashed garlic, sauteed those up. And then we deglazed with tequila, melted down our stock, added our arbo chilies, and a few bits of cilantro if we want to, okay? And so I'm looking for that happy simmer. I'm looking for that steam, okay? I need to make sure that this gets that initial heat. Once I see that, lid on, or aluminum, whatever you're using, and we are going to braise this for 2 to 3 hours, okay? So go ahead and what you'll do is you'll check it after 2, and if you need more time, you'll go ahead and go closer to 3, okay? And so pop that in your 350-degree oven. All right, so 2 hours have passed, the dreamiest, fastest 2 hours you've ever seen. And so what you'll want to do is check for doneness, okay? And so carnitas, usually what you do is you braise them and then you fry them in fat, okay? So this is just phase 1 of our delicious taco journey here, okay? But before we just take that out of the oven, we need to definitely check a piece of that pork. And so the easiest way to do that is go ahead and open up whatever you're rocking, right? Your Dutch oven or your Pyrex with aluminum, and be careful whenever you are braising, there's a lot of steam. And so always open the side that's away from you, because look at all that steam coming out. You don't want to get a steam burn here. Go ahead and just let that steam out for just 1 sec here. And I'm gonna go ahead and just grab a piece. And these are nice and even, right? Beautiful pieces of pork here. And what I'm gonna do is come on over to my cutting board, right? Or on a plate. And I'm just gonna check for doneness. And so either using your tongs, right? Just go ahead and just gently separate that pork here. And you're just looking for it to be tender, okay? You don't want it to go too far. And so that's why we want to have you check it at the 2 mark, right? That 2-hour mark. Gorgeous, okay? Because whenever you're braising something, you never want to over braise it because you lose that texture. And so check it after 2 hours. If it's not falling apart like this, give it another 30 minutes and check it every 30 minutes until it's done, okay? Everybody's oven's gonna be a little bit different, and so your braising time will be anywhere from 2 to 3 hours. And the best way to check is just to grab a little piece of pork itself. And because you're checking that pork, you get a chef snack, okay? Thank you guys so much for doing the homework the night before, okay? If you guys have any questions at all, I'm always available via email at Connie@truffleshufflesf.com. And I cannot wait to make these tacos with you guys. Good luck with that braise. You're gonna crush it, and I'll see you tomorrow.